The story begins with the princess of the Florentine Empire, Ascietarth. Florence takes a walk through the garden. The girl is simply delighted with this place and thanks her servant for bringing her to this garden despite the prohibitions. The maid of the imperial palace is called Rowena. Hera sees. She promises her mistress to bring her to this beautiful place again, having first received permission from Lord Akan. This makes Ashtarth tense and nervous. She doesn't want Rowena to get hurt because of her whim and asks if it's possible to do this without Ashan knowing. The servant says that it would be better than sneaking in without his knowledge. The reason was that the garden was not laid out for Princess Ashtartha. In a magical way, the prince created this place where spring and summer reign forever for the Princess of Light and forbade outsiders from entering here. But Lowen believes that nothing terrible will happen if they stay here a little longer. After all, the magical protection not only protects the flowers and trees from the weather, but also protects them from encroachments by humans. Ashtarth, having heard about such possibilities of magic, says that she also wants to learn to cast spells. If she could do it, she would revive the vegetation outside the emperor's palace and also clean up the palace itself. The princess believed that this would make it easier for the maidservant herself. After all, the girl cleans the entire palace on her own, sometimes with the help of Ashtartha, which makes her uncomfortable and unfamiliar. But she was even more interested in how a young princess, who was in charge of the fate of the smallest servant in the palace, could be considered a creature of darkness, who was destined to bring a lot of trouble to the people and the population of the empire. Lowen's experiences had a basis. The year had come when, according to prophecy, new stars would come together to create new light and new darkness. The light would miraculously bring prosperity and development to the empire. Darkness, on the contrary, will absorb everything that was light and good and bring devastation and death to all living things. Their eternal struggle will reach a new climax, and from now on, everything will depend on the supporters of the parties. And just as the high priest had prophesied, two princesses were born. One of them was born a simple woman from the people. However, she had all the outward signs of belonging to the ruling family of the empire. But Princess Ashtart, who was born into the ruler's family, had none of the signs of the imperial dynasty. But what surprised everyone the most was her black hair, which was not at all typical of the inhabitants of the empire. Adding to the confusion was the death of Ashtaroth's mother, who died shortly after the girl's birth. Some saw this as proof that she was the child of darkness spoken of in the prophecy. Rowena, who had spent time with Ashtartha since birth, could not believe that the girl was a child of darkness. But she was too kind and sweet and did not give the impression of a demonic being. Priest to be to blame for all this. The girl thought about how she could help her mistress, but nothing good came to mind, and the matter stood still. When Achan approached the couple who were walking Belga, he asked where the young lady was and if they could keep him company. The young man insisted that Ashtarti would have more fun walking with him. The boy held the girl's hands and saw that her hands were too rough to be the hands of a young aristocrat. She did not even try to take care of them, because the hard work did not allow her to do so. Meanwhile, the girl asked him how often he had been in this garden, why he could find his way around it so easily, since she and the maid often got confused in it. He replied that he simply had a good memory for the area. In the garden, they came across a couple of children sitting in a gazebo and drinking tea. One of the children was the crown prince of the Merovingian Empire, Florence. He greeted his sister and was very happy to meet her. Riley, and with whom they were close, had the right to talk to him like that. The prince's companion was the imperial princess Amaryllis. The girl had long been thinking about how she could meet her, and now the moment had come to meet and talk to them both. The universal favorite, Amaryllis had fair hair, was popular among the people, and was the embodiment of royal beauty and grace. Her manners and elegance were the stuff of dreams for the aristocracy. That girl was not known for her tact and tolerance, so she immediately warned Ashtart to stay away from her. She understood her request because even her family did not want to see or communicate with her because of her black hair. The princess's attention was now caught by the hairpin with which Ashtarth adorned her head. She told how the decoration was given to her by a servant who treated her very well, as if she were her own sister. The princess said that the jewelry was quite worn, but then she reached out and ordered the hairpin to be given to her. Ashtartha had not expected such a reaction, so she was confused about it. Amaryllis was angry. She asked what was so bad about that old hairpin and why it was so dear to the girl. After all, if anyone had heard their conversation, they would have thought she was trying to take it away. The conversation was witnessed by Achan. He was waiting for his mistress's reaction in order to understand what to do next. The girl thought for a moment. She did not want to part with the jewelry, so she announced that she was not going to give it away. Ashtartha informed her very politely and courteously that the jewelry was a gift and she was not going to give it to anyone for nothing. The princess could not hold back. She became angry and attacked the girl. Her brother stopped her. He grabbed the girl by the hand and ordered her to stop the bullying. After all, this was below royal dignity and testified to her low level of ethical development and, in general, the level of culture to which everyone was equal. Amaryllis began to cry. The boy leaned over to her and asked if he should find a similar piece of jewelry if the girl liked it so much that she decided to start a conflict with her friend. Amaryllis was offended by her brother's words. She said that he was treating her as if she were trying to take jewelry from her friend, and she had nothing else to do. Her brother's behavior shocked her. At this time, Achan was taking care of Ashtartha. He leaned over the girl and asked if she was in any pain, and if she would show a desire to leave this place before the princess came to her senses and resumed the quarrel. Amaryllis was angry with her brother because she believed that no one had the right to oppose her and contradict her will. The girl was actually offended by her brother, who had never opposed her. Ashtarat was left alone with the crown prince. He asked if the girl was not too scared and if her new dress was not damaged. The young man added that it looked much better than the old one. The young man thought that it really took the girl a long time to cope with buying a new dress. Her maid must be very bad at calculations and finances. But the prince's shock reached its peak when the girl told him about her maid and how she had made the dress for her. He could not believe that the princess could not afford to buy herself a simple dress. But Majek decided to say that next time he wouldn't be able to stop Sister Riley. So it's not worth making her angry and making the little girl angry. After all, she can do a lot of bad things to her enemies. Ashtartha asked why she couldn't also receive a share of his love and respect. After all, she was also his sister, and she became very sad from the realization of her own abandonment and the feeling that no one needed her. The prince said that if he had to choose between Ashtarth and Riley, he would definitely choose Riley. The fate of his other sister did not concern him at all and did not cause him any emotion. He stood up and asked her not to look at him with such a pitying look because she wouldn't be able to manipulate him like that and get him to sympathize. And the prince wasn't used to doing this to someone purely out of pity. Astarta was left alone. She thought about why fate was so unfair to her. After all, the girl did not want too much. It would even be enough for her to sometimes just walk through this garden with her father and brother. But all her thoughts and desires about finally being loved were just dreams and had no chance of coming true. So she had to gather her strength and return to her abandoned palace. On the way, she came across a book. It was not just a book, but a book with magic spells and theoretical points of mastering magic. There were not many magicians in the empire, but members of the imperial family owned it. The girl carefully examined the book and everything written in it. The letters were unfamiliar to Ashtartha. In order to master magic, one needs to know at least 2 languages and have the correct pronunciation. In addition, the mastery of magic and spells was quite complex and was only accessible to members of noble families. They mastered the languages of witchcraft from childhood, which Ashtarati never managed to do. Eem. Suddenly, the girl realized that the letters on the sheets of paper in front of her were forming words. She understood what the magic book was about. The page she had opened at random spoke of the magic of disappearance. Ashtartha began to read page after page. The words began to make sense to the girl, and the notes in the margins, most likely made by the crown prince himself, provided additional explanation to the little girl. Over time, the princess realized that her brother was noting questions he didn't understand at all, or questions that were very interesting to him. The girl wondered if he would start to treat her better if she helped him. Magic could work in her favor, so she should do her best to master everything written in this book. Then she can attract the attention of her brother and father with her abilities. Ashtartha struggled to read the word, which seemed completely incomprehensible despite all her efforts to decipher its meaning. Suddenly, she found herself in the middle of a dark, empty room, sitting on the floor. Her last memory was a bright glow that enveloped her after she tried once again to correctly read and pronounce the mysterious word. After that, she heard a strange sound and found herself in this place. The girl listened to the surrounding sounds and realized that she was not alone in this room. A man with shackles on his hands came out of the darkness in front of her. He scared the girl very much and made her nervous. The man in chains turned out to be a boy. He said that if the girl managed to get away from here soon, he would not kill her or abuse her. However, his appearance did not indicate such cruelty. The girl carefully examined the page of the book on which she had been transported here. But she could not do anything, despite her attempts to read the word as it should be. But her efforts did not lead to anything good. The boy stood behind her and watched what she did. Finally, tired of watching silently, he asked what kind of magic she was using. Ashtartha explained that the spell was to help find a path in life. The young man introduced himself. His name was Abilion, but the girl learned nothing more about him. It only became clearer that he had been in this room for a long time and liked to joke with people and just talk. He had seemed very angry to her from the very beginning, but now he didn't seem that way. He asked how he could address the girl and what he should do with her if her magic didn't work again like it had last time, and there would be no effect. Meanwhile, the young man told the girl a legend about the ancient goddess Ashtaroth. She was a deity of love and war. Such extremes indicated the specificity of the worship and the power over people's lives that she had. Ryan became a good friend to the girl, whom he allowed to stay in his possession until she found a way out of the situation she was in. Her opinion of this handsome man with purple eyes changed very much. From the very beginning, the girl thought he was a criminal because he had shackles on his hands. But over time, his attitude and behavior indicated that Ryan was a very good person, and you can't judge a book by its cover. Once, Sarg? Ashtaratha asked the young man if he had been here all this time alone. His fate interested the girl more than her own. After all, his stay here also raised many questions. The young man tried his best to avoid answering the question. The girl asked if he really lived here with his family. Ryan smiled mysteriously, then asked if the family was actually visiting and how they ended up here. Ashtartha replied that she definitely had a father. However, fate decreed that he did not visit her often. And recently, he had not shown himself at all. His attitude towards his daughter was far from ideal. In a strange way, the girl remembered her maid when it came to family. Memories of Leona caused pain in her heart. Ashtartha wanted to return to her friend as soon as possible. Finally, the day came when the girl ran to Ryan and told him that she had found the information she needed in the book and had finally managed to decipher it. The spell that had brought her here might bring her back. She boasted to the boy that she would soon do something to return home. He was happy for his friend, but he thought about her ability to magic. After all, in recent days, Ashtaroth, named after the goddess, had read a large number of spells. The last time the princess cast a spell, she did it very poorly, and it backfired on her. A strong whirlwind swept through the room and lifted things into the air, scattering them in all directions. Ryan rushed to help the girl. The shackles prevented him from working properly with his hands, but he sat down next to her and used his whole body to block the objects and furniture that were flying in the air until the vortex calmed down. Memories of the past overwhelmed the young man. He remembered sitting alone in a dark room. He was in a lot of pain and blamed himself for what he had done. That time, he also lost control of his powers. This time, he reassured Ashtartha not to blame herself for what had happened. The girl should have more respect for herself and less blame for all possible misdeeds. After all, she was still a princess in her own home. Ashtartha remembered this attitude from Leona. It was very nice when someone was worried about you and concerned about your well-being, but it was uncomfortable to hear something like that from someone you barely knew. The girl asked the young man if he was really worried about her. He replied that she was his guest, and he was aware of his responsibility for her and her safety while she was in his palace. The princess explained that every time she was treated like this, the girl felt a good emotion that reminded her that someone needed her and that someone did care about her fate. The girl felt warm and happy. Ryan said that she just reminded him of someone from his past life, but he didn't want to talk about that right now. Instead, he asked if the girl herself thought she should stop using magic. Ashtartha remembered that she had promised him that she would use magic no more than 10 times a day, and she often exceeded that limit. But she still wanted to return to her home, although she really enjoyed being a guest. The princess thought that she probably shouldn't have opened that book at all and tried to impress anyone with her knowledge of magic. Ryan spoke to her as she had thought about something again during the conversation. The boy asked why she didn't want to try the new transport magic. After all, there were many other spells in the book that could transport her to her homeland and move her directly to the royal palace. Ashtartha liked the idea. She thought that there was truth in her friend's words, and she could actually try to use the new spell to turn things around and fix the situation. After this conversation, Ryan began to help the girl. After all, he saw her abilities for magic, but they were not systematized, and it was worth putting her knowledge and skills regarding the use of spells in order. The young man also explained that in order to use magic properly, one needs a supply of mana. He also added that in order to produce mana properly, one needs to eat properly and get enough sleep and rest. But the most important question was how the girl came to understand the ancient language in which the spellbook was written, and whether she could also understand any other ancient language and explain what it was about. Ryan told that all magic books and spells are written in a language similar to the ancient languages of their ancestors. There were 3 of them in total. Knowing one of these languages makes a person a genius. Knowing 2 makes him like a hero. But when a person mastered all 3 languages, it could be considered a blessing from heaven. And such a magician enjoyed unprecedented power and authority among his fellow magicians. But there was also a dark side to this. If a person could wield such power, then the vast store of mana could simply kill them. For this, It is necessary to train your talent and form the skill of magic. Ryan saw potential in the girl. However, it was worth making an effort to make her a very high level sorcerer, and at the same time, so that the girl would not harm herself by using her magical abilities. The young man asked the girl to realize one thing and not tell anyone about it. It was better to keep her ability to magic a secret for as long as possible. She also had to realize that she would be envied and feared. Ryan asked the girl to stop her studies for today. He ordered her to rest and gather her strength. And the next day, he had something to show her, to demonstrate his abilities in the magical craft. Night came, and thoughts of returning home soon haunted the girl. She decided to disobey her friend's order and climb to get the book. Astarta decided to practice even more, but in secret. It so happened that Ashtartha slipped and fell from the ladder. Fortunately, Rayan was nearby. He guessed that the girl would do this, and soon she was sitting in front of him, and he treated her bruises and bruises all over her body. The young man suddenly asked if his handcuffs scared her. Astarta replied that she had been scared of them at the very beginning of their acquaintance. But now she realized that he was a very good person and deserved respect. The young man decided to change the subject and asked who Lowena was, whom the girl had called for help when she fell from the ladder. Ashtartha told him that she was her servant, who had replaced her mother and father since childhood. She was treated very badly in her father's palace. Even the common servants tried to insult her and tease her in every way behind her back, because they knew that no one would stand up for the little girl, and she was defenseless against them. But when she finally turned 3, the girl met her personal maid. This girl became the only one who was not afraid to be in the same house with the child of darkness. That's what everyone called the girl out of sight. Over time, Her Majesty's estate turned into an abandoned building. The servants fled from there or simply left their service due to the unwillingness to be under the same roof with the cursed child. The other servants thought that Lowena was joking when she said that she would remain in the princess's palace until the end, being her faithful and devoted servant. Her friends thought that something had happened to Lowena's head. Many said that it would be better to go and serve Lady Amaryllis. Now, no one was accepting people there because there were no vacancies. But the truth was, it was easy to bribe and get into the main palace of the empire. One day, Lowena became furious and attacked her friend because she had spoken ill of Ashtartha, calling her a child of darkness. The maid said that even the emperor himself had never called his daughter that. Marianne ignored the words that it was easy to lose one's head in this way. After all, this could be regarded as spreading false information about the ruler's family. After that, no one spoke to the girl. Ashtartha secretly witnessed this conversation. She thought about how someone had dared to stand up for her and stand up for a little girl who was nothing but was being slandered by evil human tongues. The princess began to feel grateful for Lowena and wanted to get to know her better. After everything the girl had done for her, Ashtartha considered her almost a family member, someone she could rely on. The princess said that when everyone turned their backs on her, the girl lost faith in human goodness. But Lowena stayed with her until the very end. She must have been very worried about the little girl's fate now. Late at night, when the girl was sleeping, Ryan sat in the room next to him and thought about how to bring the girl home. She had to come back because it worried even him and gave him no peace. He was deeply moved by the way the princess thought and spoke of her servant, whom she considered almost a saint to herself. For a moment, he wondered if she would think the same of him when he returned. Astarte's arrival entered the room. The young man asked his master how long he would keep the girl in this place, but Ryan asked when it had begun to bother the servant. The story goes back to the day when Princess Ashtart disappeared from the imperial garden. Lowena walked along the garden path, trying to find her mistress. A servant brought her food, fearing that she might faint. Luena saw Ashan, who was frantically trying to find something in the bushes. As she got closer, she heard him calling out to his mistress, Ashtaratha. It seemed that something very terrible had happened. But when the girl came even closer, she realized that the chief of the guard was not looking for her princess, but was trying to stop the angry and furious Amaryllis. The girl did not consider it necessary to respond to the appeal. The girl wondered where her mistress had been when Prince Magican appeared before her. She could not believe that the girl was now alone in the garden. Anything could happen to her. The prince greeted her and asked why Lowena was deceiving the princess. After all, he had sent her dresses, and the servant had said that she had personally sewn them with her own hands. But the prince was not angry at such a thing. Lowena thought she had made a grave mistake. After all, she had gone against the path of the second most influential person in the empire. Moreover, the prince was a genius who perfectly mastered spells and magic. But Lowena had a lot on her mind. She asked why he was so kind then. It was easier to tell the truth. The girl was at an age when ideals are easily built and destroyed. But the servant said that a man or a young man who forbids his own sister to call him brother and publicly insults and humiliates her honor and dignity is not worthy of respect. The girl lost control of herself. She no longer considered that she was speaking to the prince, the second most influential person after His Majesty the Emperor. He began to get angry and pointed out that the girl should know her place and not try to take more than she could. She was most impressed by the incident when the girl ran after her brother at a party and called him that. He got very angry and asked her not to call him brother in front of strangers. Everyone was surprised by these words. But the real reason was that Ashtartha had asked him to allocate money for a dress for her faithful servant. Magican asked why she was asking for a dress for Lowena and not for herself. The girl remained silent. For a moment, Lowen thought that when the prince agreed, Ashtartha felt a kinship with him for the first time in her life. But it was all just an illusion to her. She thought about continuing to support her mistress in every way possible, and the prince ordered that he should no longer be called brother under any of the circumstances. To her, he was none other than the hereditary prince, and she should address him as she should. He was considered a brother only to the white-haired girl princess. Lowena suffered from this poor treatment of Ashtartha even more than the girl herself. She did not want to confine her to the humble position of a slave in the imperial family. The girl thought that the two princes of the Florentine Empire, Noah and Magican, were the most powerful people on the continent. But even such people had their limitations and boundaries in this life. The prophecy of the chief high priest, the Horium, contained a dire warning for both of them. They didn't have to believe it, but it was frightening and made them think about it even before they began their reign. The father advised the boys to simply stay away from the palace where the child of darkness was born. That's why no one even thought of visiting and talking to the princess, who was left alone after her mother's death. Of course, after all this, many believed that Amaryllis was the child of light. It was on her that everyone around pinned their hopes and expectations. Prince Mirajane was no exception to this number of people. But recently, his behavior has changed dramatically. Everyone around him has witnessed this. Noah's younger brother was the first to notice the changes in his brother's character. Every meeting left a mark. This time, Noah came with a report regarding the pursuit of a man suspected of attempting to assassinate Prince Magican. And he almost succeeded, if not for the guards and Ashtarth. The conversation was now interrupted by a servant who announced that she had already finished preparing dresses for the maidservant from Princess Ashtarta's palace. The younger brother was surprised by such generosity and gifts from Magican. Meanwhile, the maid asked if there was anything else His Highness the Prince needed. He replied that his orders were ending for today, and he was not going to discuss the subject of dresses for the princess and her servant any further. Neo stood thoughtful. He never thought that his older brother would hide his orders from him. But Magician stopped the maid again. He ordered that the dresses for Princess Astarta be prepared again. Another batch. Now Luina stood before the prince. She realized her mistake and that she had treated the crown prince in this way for no reason. After all, he had his reasons for acting as he had done for his sister in secret. This time, the prince said he would pretend he hadn't heard anything. He also emphasized that the girl should appreciate his kindness and never do the same thing again as she had done to him today in front of his subjects. The prince passed by the servant and stopped only for a moment. He asked if Rowena knew why he had spared her today. The boy, after a silence, said that it was only because his sister had asked for a dress for the servant. Achan approached the girl. He said that Rowena had acted rashly when she started speaking to His Majesty in that tone. That should never be done, and the fact that she was still alive was a real miracle. Rowena, instead of thanking him, attacked Ashan and began to scream loudly and ask why he had left Princess Ashtartha alone. He replied that he was obeying a direct order from His Highness Prince Magician. Meanwhile, Astarte, in the company of Ryan, was walking through the garden in his possessions. Surprisingly, she noticed that the garden was actually very similar to the one her brother had created with the help of spells and magic, specifically for the ruling family. The walk was to end with dinner in the gazebo. The girl savored a sandwich and asked Ryan why he was treating her so well. After all, only he and Lianga could treat her like that without trying to humiliate her. The young man replied that he had already said that she looked like someone very dear to him. Well, the reason is actually something personal. But the girl might think that he was just being so kind to her and taking care of her. The girl thought that her friend was a very good person, but the only thing that confused her was why he was in shackles and whether she could help take them off him. They were very heavy and uncomfortable. What surprised her most was that he wore the shackles for no good reason. He was certainly not a criminal, but he did not seek to throw them off himself. Astarta suggested that he remove them from her and become free in his actions and deeds. The girl was about to go find the spell she needed to free her friend. He took her hand and asked her if she really thought he would buy into this trick and trust her to cast a spell. The boy said that he guessed that she intended to get the Book of Magic Spells, but it was too early for her to do that. After all, the girl had not restored her mana reserves and was badly injured after falling from a ladder, which left its mark. The young man explained that if a sorcerer or magician ignores the needs of their body, they will simply lose their strength. Ignoring proper rest will lead to a person simply losing their strength and abilities. So, no matter how good the girl's intentions are, she still won't get the book at her disposal until Ryan himself decides to give it to Ashtartha for use. Ryan saw that the girl was offended. He asked for forgiveness because he had never doubted the girl's good intentions towards him. However, the time to remove the shackles had not yet come, and it was too early to even think about it. Finally, he said that if he didn't wear them, certain people would be scared and very uncomfortable to know about it. That is, he didn't want to arouse any suspicions about his modest persona and generate gossip and talk. Astarta wondered who those people could be. They certainly weren't his family. She asked if he was tired of doing this. He replied that his willpower would last more than 1 year. So Ryan had to deal with it. The girl asked if he really liked living like that. She understood perfectly well what it meant to live alone, unwanted by anyone, and considered almost an outcast among people who lived a normal life. It's time for the main character to talk about her past life, when she wasn't in the body of a princess, whom everyone considered a child of darkness. Astarte was then a simple slave who was constantly resold by merchants. The Viscount, who eventually got her, liked the girl very much. But even for them, the girl became just an unusual toy. The children loved to joke with her and play with her feelings. And the more she suffered and tormented, the better it was for them. She had even started to get used to it and simply ignored the physical and moral pain and fatigue of this whole thing called her life. But the children also noticed changes in their living doll. They thought that this time it would be worth putting something in so that it would actually suffer and have new experiences, and they would enjoy it. But this time, they went too far. The children had put poison in their food. Astarta, from her past life, lay for a long time on the cold floor, writhing in pain that tore at her from the inside, causing her inhuman torment. The girl was dying. She called for help, but no one came. So before she died, she made a wish to be in a family where she would be loved and respected, and she herself would take care of her loved ones. The girl was deeply immersed in memories of her past life. Ryan had to speak to her loudly again to wake her up from her stupor. He understood that at such moments, the girl was thinking about something very important. The young man finally said that he would try to do as she wished. He was not going to live his whole life closed to everyone, so now he would try to prepare for a new way of life. Trouble arose again in the emperor's palace. The cause of this was a single word that Amaryllis had carelessly spoken to her father, the emperor. The girl told him about her adventure with Ashtartha and her refusal to obey. The emperor that same day sent messengers to all corners of the state to search for the most beautiful ornament. And inside the palace, rumors spread that Ashtartha simply hated her sister and was trying to mock her. Rowena came into the room where Sir Acon was sitting very quickly. She asked for help in solving the problem. The reason was that she could not find Princess Ashtartha, and no one helped her in this. The girl asked for help. Acon asked her to calm down and tell everything in order. The head of the guard noted with surprise that the girl had been missing since their walk in the lily garden and had only just been informed about it. Sir Achan considered himself guilty of what happened to the girl. After all, he was supposed to look after her, but instead, he went to carry out the orders of His Highness Prince Magican, thereby neglecting his duties. Achan also remembered his first meeting with Rowena and the young princess. Then the maidservant came to his office and asked why the guards did not consider it necessary to adequately protect Princess Astarta's palace. The officers, who were in the same office with Acon at that time, were amazed to have the opportunity to see the child of darkness in person. She looked just as the high priest's prophecy had described her. The men stared at the little girl as if she were the embodiment of universal evil. Some even began to fear her and asked the boss to quickly deal with their request and get them out of the office. But Acon was not going to act so rashly and so unwisely. He thought that the girl belonged to the royal family, so it was impossible to treat her like that, regardless of personal likes or dislikes. The knight looked at the girl carefully and for the first time doubted that she was the child of evil mentioned in the prophecy. He tried to explain to the girl that the guards were to blame for everything, for not doing their duty. The head of security decided to talk to the girl personally because her maid answered his questions very emotionally and descriptively. The girl told everything in order and in detail. Ashtartha said that the attacker had silver-colored hair and was dressed in a solemn-looking uniform that resembled a prince's uniform or cloak, specially prepared for a celebration or ceremony. Thus, many believed that the attacker could only have been the crown prince. But this simply could not be. The young man had no motive for such an act, and he would not stoop to such a level for anything in his life. But in reality, the girl was trying to tell not about the attacker, but about the young man she helped. He was the prince, and he personally came to thank her for saving him After all, if it weren't for her, it could have ended badly. The boy asked what the girl wanted in exchange for saving the monarch's person. Astarta asked for nothing more than a simple dress for herself. She even offended her brother a little with this and made him think about the price of life. However, the little girl called out to her brother as he was about to leave. The young man leaned over her so that the girl could whisper everything she wanted into his ear. The guards and knights watched in bewilderment. Achan still didn't know what she said, but his face changed a lot. After that, the head of the guard observed a similar phenomenon more than once. The people the princess spoke to changed a lot. Now Achan was trying to calm Rowena down. After all, in the state she was in, there was nothing she could do, let alone look for the princess. So, first of all, she should calm down and collect her thoughts. The head of security asked what had happened to that brave girl who had recently been able to come into conflict with the prince himself, provoke him, and remain unharmed after this fight. Ashan thought that Rowena should now go to Princess Ashtartha's palace and make preparations for her return. It shouldn't be too difficult. Es eit difficult, and he and his department could handle such a task quickly. The boss left the girl alone with his thoughts on how best to prepare everything for his mistress. In fact, he had not the slightest idea how or where to look for the missing girl. The maids in the hallway talked about how the princesses had quarreled. They gossiped about how Princess Ashtartha had brought Princess Amalissa to tears. Thus, everyone once again considered the black-haired one a creature of darkness and evil. Noah listened to all these stories and gossip and believed that his sister was not the monster that everyone painted her to be. He did not want to conflict with his brother, but he thought that they were not treating Ashtartha fairly. He remembered the first time he met the girl. She was talking to Rowena. The maid was going to the kitchen to get groceries. The girl asked if she could help the maid. The girl was left alone and began to lament aloud that her clothes and face were dirty. Because of this, she could forever remain lonely and alone without a loving family and loved ones. Noah couldn't resist and approached her. He asked what the girl was doing now. The boy asked what her name was, and he himself thought about what was so dangerous and frightening about this simple, ordinary girl. The prince threw his precious cloak over the girl's shoulders. He said that she would have to wait here for a long time, and that it was quite cold outside, and she might get sick with a goiter. The girl began to say that it was too much, but no one listened to her. Noah adjusted her cloak and said that he had to treat her like this because they were one family, and it was worth considering when they could meet next to talk and be alone. Mira Jane recalled how he was raised as a child. His mother insisted that he become a true ruler, and to this end, she raised him to be a cruel and ruthless ruler, often beating the little one. The young man woke up at his workplace. He had this nightmare again, and he didn't want to be alone after that. Someone's company and companionship made him feel better after such dreams. But his thoughts now turned to his mother. She was a beautiful ruler and empress, but a bad mother. Her methods of upbringing saw nothing human in a child. She was raising a monarch. Soon she died, and the little one's life went its own way. He partially lost his zest for life. From the very beginning, he had no interest in having sisters. But the position of the high priest changed everything. It was he who had instilled in the little boy the idea that one of his sisters was a monster and a child of darkness. And it was the priest who had called Amaryllis the Princess of Light, sent by God for the prosperity of people. The boy did not believe in the prophecy, but he believed that the girl could actually be the light promised by the priest. The prince loved to play with the princess and tried in every way to please her with new toys and games. But a strange feeling arose in his soul when he remembered the expression on Ashtartha's face when she called him brother. For some reason, He felt very sorry for what he had done to her, publicly scolding the little girl so harshly. Sir Akon came to the prince. He reported that Lady Ashtartha had disappeared. The crown prince asked how this could have happened and where to look for the culprit of this crime. The chief did not know what to answer. Achan replied that at the moment, the most likely place where the princess could be was the lily garden. This news greatly worried His Highness the Prince. He could only guess how his book was involved in this. The boy's heart sank. He thought he couldn't stand that girl, but now a strange feeling was haunting him, and he remained very cold, although a real storm of conflicting feelings was raging inside him. The young man advised the head of security to remain calm. After all, they would easily find the girl with the help of magic. All they had to do was concentrate and direct their will in the right direction. But there was one problem. It was that the book with Magican's magic spells had disappeared. But the prince quickly regained control of himself and sent Akon to organize a search mission, advising not to panic too much for now. The losses of the book made His Majesty very nervous. He could not believe that he had lost the magical book. But he was even more worried that Ashtanta might find it and take it with her. Then it could simply be stolen. The girl, meanwhile, sat and studied the spells in detail from the book. She had mastered the language so well that she could now easily read the spells and understand their meaning and repeat them correctly word for word. Ryan caught the girl repeating the spells over and over again. The guy advised her to be more careful with them. However, the girl replied that she would soon succeed and would no longer bother him. When the boy was alone, he thought about how quickly the girl had mastered the magic of transport. She was currently learning a spell that would transport her to the person who missed her the most. The peculiarity of this spell was that it was used as an auxiliary language in services and temple holidays. This magic could heal and create force fields and generally protect against various misfortunes. The girl, meanwhile, was filled with determination to get to where she was missed, and she knew only one such person. That was her faithful servant, who had never seen the world without her young mistress and almost child, Astarte. The young sorceress managed to open the portal. In it, she already saw the outlines of a girl who looked very much like Lowena. Ashtartha rushed to the portal, trying to return to her loved one as quickly as possible. Ryan stood in the way. He grabbed the girl tightly by the waist and held her, preventing her from moving towards the portal. This angered the little girl, but she didn't know what her more experienced comrade and friend knew. The portal closed right in front of the girl, who was already mentally near her maid. The boy explained that this spell was dangerous and unsuccessful and could lead to a fatal end to the movement through Valka's portal. Ashtaroth was not going to listen to him. She spoke the spell again, and before them, as if behind a wall of transparent mist, stood Lowena. She could not see the young magicians on the other side of the wall, but they could see her. But this time, Ashtaroth herself was very tired. She was losing consciousness. Her head seemed to be bursting. The princess ended up in the arms of Ryan, who managed to come to her aid in time and rescue her friend. He understood perfectly well that the girl's mana would not be enough to open a stable portal and pass through it without harm to her body. After all, the tunnel could close as suddenly and quickly as it opened. The girl sat in Ryan's arms. Her body seemed very heavy for her. The boy told her not to worry. He would personally take care of her recovery and training. After all, transmigration is not the easiest form of magic. The young man kept quiet, saying that the true meaning of the spell was that the sorcerer who used it would find his destiny. However, in such matters, magic lost its clarity and predictability and worked in unusual ways. Ryan carried her in his arms to the house. The girl fell asleep, and he said that it could be considered selfish, but he was not ready to lose her and part with her. He did not want to harm the princess, but he could not do otherwise. of Ryan's personal guard, whose name was Kalos, reported that he had arrived at this location after sensing a powerful surge of magic. His young masterer reported that everything was under his personal control. The officer said that the girl was not from this country, and the captain was worried. Ryan asked who he was afraid for, his master or the girl. After all, this time, the young magician was not going to resort to bloody cruelty. For Ryan to even imagine the moment of parting with this girl. After all, she was so unusual. She was somewhat like him. Although her clothes were rich and beautiful, her habits indicated a poverty of origin. Loena, meanwhile, was sitting in her room, waiting for news from Sir Akan. Suddenly, she heard a familiar voice. It seemed that she was being called from the next room. The voice belonged to her young mistress, but looking around, she saw nothing. It was already late, so the girl thought that she had really dreamed it. All that remained was to wait for news or a visit from the head of security, who would shed light on what had happened in the lily garden. There was a knock at the door. The girl jumped up and ran towards them, thinking that the princess had actually just gotten lost and had now found her way home and returned from a long walk in the garden. Loena must have been disappointed. Behind the door stood the chief of the guard, Akon. The girl immediately began to question him about what was known about the case of her mistress's disappearance. But the man simply remained significantly silent. Prince Majikan emerged from the shadows. The girl asked what this young man was doing in this place. After all, seeing him near the palace of the Child of Darkness was very strange, even in the case when the prince's sister had disappeared. Loena hinted at the high priest's prohibition against even approaching the palace of the Child of Darkness, but the prince was serious and held the door that the girl was about to close. The prince remembered the priest's arrival before he went to drink tea with Amaryllis in the lily garden. Then the high priest personally came to him and, after a long greeting, announced that the Princess of Light was in danger today. Horiom approached the young man and assured him that a blessing would descend upon him today. At the same time, the burden of protecting the princess from the attacks of enemies and foes falls on his shoulders, which he will be grateful to the supreme deity for. The prince could not believe that he had been entrusted with such a responsible mission. After all, after everyone learned about the priest, his popularity grew greatly. He began to use his power to strengthen his position. The boy began to doubt whether he was worthy of such a role. However, in the end, the priest did say that the princess personally asked him to convey her request so that his brother would not refuse. She wanted to have tea with him. Majikan did not know what the high priest had in mind. However, his attitude towards Princess Riley was very different, even from that of his beloved flock. So his order that could not be ignored. Riley was attacked. Majikan managed to shield his sister from the attacker. It turned out to be a man in a hood and jacket. His features could not be seen, but that would have been of no use. The stranger's energy evoked bad associations, and the prince pondered whether to leave him alive or kill him outright, sacrificing intelligence on the person who had ordered the assassination attempt on Riley. The attacker, meanwhile, said that he had heard far beyond the empire about Prince Majikan's talent for magic. Now he was asking for the opportunity to compose his own spell and use it to attack his opponent. The prince understood that he was facing a serious opponent who would be difficult to deal with. But the main thing was not to let him through to Riley and the maids, who could not leave the room because of the armed men. That time, the prince only managed to activate his protective magic. He tried to ensure that the princess and her maids were not harmed. The young man himself was injured, but it was not as serious as he had guessed. Riley and her maids seized the opportunity and hurried to the main palace for safety. And a girl approached the magician, very similar in description to the Child of Darkness, about whom the priest had vividly spoken. The attacker, meanwhile, realized that his victim was alive. He wanted to attack again, but he was afraid that the guards would arrive and he would be counted out. In addition, he had either pronounced the spell incorrectly or had not finalized it. He was about to flee when the enraged prince uttered a spell that he hoped would stop the attacker. It was a terrible spell in essence. The attacker's body was wrapped around a snake that glowed in the darkness a bright green color. Meanwhile, the prince thought that it would be worth finding out exactly what spell his opponent was using. After all, if he perfected it, Magickin would have very little chance of surviving the next battle. Ashtaroth again around him, who had helped him after the battle, treating his wounds and disinfecting his body. However, the prince immediately remembered his cruel mother and her advice on kindness and sincerity. So, he simply left the girl on the rocks. He hoped that fate would not bring them together again. Nothing in life was going to change from this moment of salvation. His attitude would be the same as it had been up to this moment. This is how the prince told everything that made him go in search of Astarta. He said that he simply owed the girl a great debt, a favor that was hard to repay and hard to forget because you remember it every day. The prince added that if he could have broken his promise to protect his sister, he would have. However, that was simply not possible now. He added that he would like to see the palace where Princess Astarte lived. The young man was surprised by the state the palace was in. It looked more like an abandoned house, from which the owners had long since left and no one had any intention of returning. The guests were amazed at the state everything was in. Lowen said that it was no surprise, as she had petitioned many times for funds to be allocated for the renovation of the premises. The maid continued to tell her that no one answered her letters, but the girl wanted only one thing: to see her family. For this, she was ready to endure everything and overcome a lot. The prince was very lucky that his sister's sincere heart could not hold a grudge against him and his surroundings for long. Ashtartha simply quietly loved her relatives, even though they had treated her cruelly and turned their backs on the poor thing. Finally, they reached the princess's room. Mirajane was amazed at the state it was in. This room would have been perfect for servants or a stable. But the princess was not meant to live here. The boy continued to look around the room. He suddenly found his younger brother Yao's cloak among the pile of clothes. He was interested in how it ended up here, in this place, and what would happen next. Prince Mirajan began to suspect that his brother had secretly met with Ashtartha. But why hadn't he told him about it personally? And Lowen added that the girl didn't want to give the cloak to anyone who asked for it, for anything. The maid told her that she wanted to take this thing from the lady so that she would not be suspected of stealing it. The girl replied that it was the first gift she had received from her family. The princess remembered that day many times, and she kept talking about the sweet, fair-haired boy who had given her that cloak. After all, he had said then that he had to do it for her, because it was his duty as a relative. Lowena then asked if she loved her relatives, since she had never seen or spoken to them up close before. The girl replied that she did not hold a grudge against them, but was trying to understand the reasons for their behavior. The maid also told how the girl said that she loved her family just like that. This was taught to her by Lowena herself. The prince asked if, in order not to give hope, the servant said that she sewed the dresses and they were not given to her. Now His Highness regretted that he did not possess magic that would allow him to turn back time. Then he would have changed many things in his life. After all, first of all, he would have changed his attitude towards his sister Ashtaroth. Now Mirajan understood the feeling that had filled him in the garden. He hadn't forgotten about the girl. He had actually been waiting a long time to meet her. It hurt him to be the one to start the conversation. That's why he reacted so strongly to her request. His past actions and the shame he felt for them prevented him from reacting calmly to what was happening. But the boy tried his best to hold back and not show his feelings to outsiders. Ryan sat above the bed where the girl lay and rested. She did not expect to see him next to her. The events of the previous day scrolled like a kaleidoscope in the poor, sad magician's head. Beginners. Ashtartha guessed that she had lost consciousness because she had overused magic. The boy said that she was not feeling sorry for herself at Ishiroi, so today she was supposed to spend the whole day in bed and rest after the attempt. When the owner was about to leave, the girl took him by the sleeve of his shirt and asked him to stay with her. She wanted to be with him for at least a moment. The girl promised not to bother him any more. Ryan wondered who had taught the girl to communicate in this way, and who had made her think that asking to stay with her was something bad and unworthy of other people's attention. The guest noticed that Ryan was starting to get angry for some reason. She thought that he looked a lot like her old servant friend Lowena when he was angry. The memories again gave rise to a feeling of longing for her and her own home. Ashtartha told the boy that she tried not to bother anyone for fear of being abandoned. This was what happened to her family, who almost disowned her and pretended that she didn't exist at all. Ryan asked her if she liked living in this place. The girl wondered what her friend wanted from her. He said that she could stay and live with him for as long as she wanted and considered necessary. The young man understood that this would be cruel to Lowena, who was waiting for her mistress. However, he also wanted the girl to stay with him for a long time, even with the prospect of remaining the mistress of his house forever. The boy tried to explain to the girl that she shouldn't try to make everyone love her. She shouldn't love everyone either. After all, there were people who loved her just like that. The girl understood everything and hugged Ryan tightly. Ryan said that in her eyes, she deserved love just by the fact of her existence. But he didn't want the girl to hesitate or think about how she should act so as not to offend anyone with her action. Astarta realized that Ryan really loved her. He wanted her to stay with him very much, but at the same time, he didn't want to burden her with his desires. So he let her go with a pure heart and good intentions. Finally, the girl fell asleep. Ryan put the book with magic spells on the shelf so that the princess could find it. But deep down, he wanted it to happen not soon, and she would master magic slowly. In the morning, the princess felt better. She once again understood that her friend and mentor was right about the mana charge. It is this that affects the strength and power of the wizard's spell and allows it to be used. The young witch remembered how Ryan had talked about the interrupted spell and its harm to the user if they actually decided to use it. After all, there was a fatal outcome. Ashtra thought for a moment that her friend might have been deliberately preventing her from performing magic and opening portals. But she couldn't believe that the sweet Ryan was capable of such treachery and deceit for his own benefit. The princess thought that he had no urgent need to keep her in his house. But for some reason, the thought still haunted her. The young man himself was nowhere to be seen. He seemed to have disappeared along with the others. Suddenly, Ashtartha saw her spellbook. She hadn't thought it was so close. The mere fact of it being so close made her think about trying to use magic again. But everything was not as simple as it seemed at first glance. The girl could not reach the book. It was very high, and the princess fell off the stool again and again, never reaching her cherished goal. The girl suddenly remembered a couple of spells with which she could make the object fall directly into her hands. Finally, her attempts were crowned with success, and the girl held the book in her hands very carefully and firmly. Ashtartha began to fear that she had badly damaged the book or smeared it, and so the prince would be angry when he got the book with the spells back. But it was worth trying to get back to her home first. Sir Akan, meanwhile, reported to the prince that he had no leads regarding the future investigation. The chief of the guard believed that he should soon find a solution to this problem, and in the meantime, he asked for forgiveness. He dismissed the suggestion that magic might have been involved. No trace of the use of a spell had been found. The prince replied that he had investigated the garden himself and agreed with Akon. The prince said that the longer they searched for her, the greater the likelihood that the public would learn about the girl's disappearance and search. And that shouldn't happen yet. After all, the Child of Darkness was not popular. Magickin called Noah to his office. He immediately guessed that his brother would ask for a favor. He knew that he could be relied on and that Noah would keep his mouth shut. He wouldn't give the matter to anyone. The crown prince asked his brother to begin the search for Astarte furs. No one was supposed to know about this, even though the girl had disappeared the day before. The official investigation has not yet been announced or made public. Noah understood the seriousness of the situation. However, he was more surprised by the fact that his brother had never shown any concern for the girl or interest in her affairs, and now he asked to start his own investigation and search. The magician said that he would seek to be closer to her after she was found and to be there to control her if the saint was right in his prophecy. The younger brother doubted the feasibility of this. The little one could not disobey his older brother's orders. He remembered the lessons his mother had taught him. He had to agree to his brother's suggestions and blindly believe and obey his will and orders. The elder brother decided to test the loyalty of the younger one last time. He asked where his precious robe had gone. The younger replied that he had soiled it very much and thrown it away. The magician asked if he had given it to Ashtarati. Now the crown prince was only interested in why he had done it. Noah asked if it was really an order. The elder replied that it was just a request for now. The elder replied that he would not say the answer anyway, even if it was an order. Sir Aton came to visit Lowena. He asked if she was waiting for him. The girl replied that she had simply seen him approaching through the window. For some reason, the young man wanted her to wait for him and cheer for him. The maid had lost a lot of weight during the time her young mistress had been away. And again, Akon could not please her with information. No trace of the girl could be found anywhere. Some were beginning to lose hope that they would ever find Astarte. Lowena asked the head of security not to visit her so often. After all, she hears the same thing every time. And there was no result. So the girl asked to visit her less often, not so often, and not to talk nonsense. But Icon said that this time everything was completely different. He assured that Prince Noah had come to him. He was starting his investigation, which his older brother, the crown prince, had asked him to do. Then the case would start moving quickly. So the man asked Lowena not to worry. And the girl, in turn, asked if he had anything valuable for himself. The young man replied that unfortunately, he did not have any. The maid assured him that then he would not understand. Lowena assured that when you lose this thing or person, you begin to realize its importance for yourself. It's not the world as a whole that changes, but the person's view of it, their attitude towards it. The servant came to the window and said that her last hope was him, Ashon. The man had to find the girl at any cost. Besides, he was a brilliant investigator in his time, and many cases were solved thanks to his efforts. When he looked at the girl, he realized that she had lost not only her mistress, but also a part of herself. So he reminded her of that too. And you shouldn't do something like that, because then you can get into serious trouble. Ashtartha faced a problem. Her spells weren't working right now. She thought she was reading and pronouncing everything correctly, but the desired effect wasn't really noticeable at all. The girl was afraid that something might happen to her powers and she would no longer be able to cast spells. And she was even more afraid of the prospect of not being able to return to her home. The princess reassured herself that she would accumulate mana for Ryan in the guest room. The boy did not like anyone who dared to visit his palace. In the hall stood a red-haired boy, whom the host had ordered in a previous meeting not to come here again. The Naga state. His name was Joshua. Nogais. Dan, and he frankly missed the company of his friend Rian. After all, Ryan would never be the first to approach him to see him. The guys sat at the table and talked. The topic of conversation turned to the shackles on His Highness Rion's hands. Joshua said that many years had passed since that incident, and Ryan still wore them, although he could have freed it himself. The boy promised to free his friend from the nickname Butcher of Elforman. Although it meant nothing to Ryan himself, everyone tried to help him, even when he didn't ask for help. The Elformans were one of the main families of the Nogais state, and this surname was given to the descendant of Abelian, Elforman. Initially, he was called that only by those who wished him well and prosperity. But it so happened that Abelian possessed a unique power. It often got out of control because without a mentor and teacher, the boy could not master it. Once he crippled his brother, John. After that, the poor boy lost his leg. And the reason for this was a banal desire to show off his own strength and show what Abelian himself was capable of. His own brother paid for this. But something even more terrible was to happen in the future. The young man began to realize that with such power, he became a threat to the emperor himself. He was asked many times not to use force and not to flaunt it. But even though the situation with his brother was an accident, he was tormented by pangs of conscience. The boy often could not sleep at night and would sit alone for hours until fatigue overcame him and he fell asleep. No one in his family blamed him for anything. However, their kindness and attitude made the boy regret what he had done even more. He was in pain and often did not even leave his room. The boy believed that even if no one said anything to him, they thought very harshly of him and tried their best not to show their displeasure. He was afraid to see the disgust in their eyes. A year later, the boy was summoned to an audience by His Majesty the Emperor. Ryan still considered himself unworthy and thought that people like him should be confined to dark dungeons, restricted in their movements. The father, right in front of the house where the meeting was to take place, told his son that he should avoid any provocation. Under no circumstances did he have the right to use force in the presence of His Majesty. Ryan walked the halls of this house and thought about why people hated the current ruler. After all, he spent a lot of money on decorations and finishing his office and the entire house instead of state affairs. The little one asked his father if anything would change after the emperor's son, the current crown prince, came to power. The father replied that it was unlikely that anything would change, but he still hoped that he would be a better ruler. The guests knelt before the emperor, who was often called the Golden Dragon of Nogais. The monarch asked to discard formalities and speak directly, as a friendly atmosphere between almost equals was to prevail. Behind the emperor stood his two sons. Albert Nogais asked the guests to make themselves at home. After all, the reason for which he had called them was quite serious. The emperor himself did not give the impression of a serious person, but the atmosphere around him did not please the little boy. He felt some kind of threat from His Majesty the Emperor when he rose from the throne and moved towards him and his father. The ruler slowly uttered his words. The Golden Dragon. Nogaiza said that he had recently received strange information regarding what Joker Elforman was really doing in his father's possessions undercover. The emperor feared this family, for they had a lineage that reached far beyond the reach of the current ruler. And even now, among the aristocracy, the Elformans enjoyed unprecedented influence. For His Majesty's family, the Elforman family was a real thorn in their side. They did not like it, and tried to weaken its position in every way. Even the slightest pretext was of great importance to them when it came to their opponents. The emperor leaned over Ryan and said that there was something he wanted to check. The little one remembered his father's instructions and promised himself to keep himself in check, but the monarch was persistent. The man asked the boy if he knew Veyrak, and if that meant he could do magic. Ryan was confused. He was afraid of the consequences of whatever he said to His Majesty. Either way, it would be very bad. The emperor had ordered an answer. He wasn't going to stand there like a fool, and if the boy was silent like that, it meant he was hiding something from his ruler. Ryan didn't know what to say. He hadn't been doing magic since the accident. The boy thought that if his father had brought him here, then the secret he had been guarding was now common knowledge, and there was no point in keeping quiet in front of the emperor, but it was still risky to do so. The emperor's eldest son came to the boy's defense. He said that if the Elformine family had such power, they would certainly use it and show their might. The father emperor agreed with his son. He said that he agreed. After all, one can speak the truth when there are no strangers around. The two families now present in the room have long been hidden enemies and foes. Ryan's father stood up for the little one. He also said that the aristocrats were simply trying to incite enmity between the two families in order to make them fight and become weak. There were even rumors that the Elformine family wanted to use the Joker's extraordinary powers to raise an uprising against the current ruler and bring his family to nothingness. But the emperor was not ready to take his word for it. He pierced Rion's father's leg with a sword and ordered the boy to demonstrate his strength. Otherwise, his father could say goodbye to the limb and say goodbye to the position of the current duke. The boy continued to say that he knew nothing, but his position clearly did not allow for negotiations. The monarch could easily deal with his father, torturing and mocking him. But the emperor's family had another trump card up their sleeve. They had brought the entire duke's family here. The younger brother and mother stood under the guillotine, awaiting a brutal execution if Ryan refused to show his strength. Ryan was faced with a choice. Either he agreed to His Majesty's offer for the sake of demonstration, or his family would die. The cursed power had haunted him all his life. Now he had to use it to save himself. The little one used a spell in the ancient language. Above him and his opponents, a pentagram on the ceiling shone brightly. Energy began to spread throughout the hall. The emperor and his eldest son looked up in surprise. The ruler was simply delighted with what he had witnessed. But the boy had another goal. He decided to punish the people who dared to threaten his family and try to kill all his loved ones. The father turned to his son, trying to calm him down. After all, the power was not given to him for the purpose of destruction and murder. The man spoke with his last strength, but he asked not to use violence in this hall. Finally, the father said that he could put a truly loyal people and a responsible emperor on the throne of Nogaiza. It is for this that one can apply one's abilities, because it will be done for the good of the people. The young man remembered the ending of this story and said that in exchange for the safety of the entire family, he was forced to admit that it was not the emperor, but that it was he who had cracked down on the family and caused their death. Ryan asks the guest what he sees as a true emperor, the ruler of these lands. The guest replies that he should be a wise and intelligent ruler, and the people under his rule should know peace and prosperity. The question confused the young monarch, but now Ryan himself had replied that he thought the same thing, and that could only mean that the boy was preparing to throw off his shackles and take his rightful place. A loud sound from the mountain interrupted their conversation. Joshua asked if his friend had any other guests. He replied that something had simply fallen on the floor and made a noise. See. Ryan felt the magical aura around him weaken. So he wondered if the girl had managed to safely reach her home and the servant she missed so much and simply couldn't live without. But now his thoughts returned to the betrayal that had deprived him of a full-fledged family and had caused enmity and exacerbated the conflict. The maid told of the attempts to master the magic of the young lord Ryan. A rogue magician who served the emperor decided that it was worth manipulating this and finding out if there really was someone more powerful than himself in this world. And he took the opportunity to implement his plan. After Ryan learned the truth, he no longer had a peaceful day or night, and the appearance of the girl in his chambers frightened him. However, over time, she began to take up more and more space in his life and heart. Ryan thought about how he didn't want to part with this girl. After all, she was important to him. From the very beginning, their destinies had been somewhat similar, but now he understood that he felt something more than just sympathy. The boy thought that he couldn't try to leave Astarte here. He could have done something else. Ryan himself could have gone after her and been there with her, trying to help her and make her life easier. Ashtartha did get transported. She found herself in a building that bore little resemblance to the Empress's palace. The girl understood that she had never been here before, but the spell was supposed to send a message to the one who missed her. Suddenly, a stranger grabbed her hand. It was a fair-haired young man, and he was the emperor of the Furs Empire, and his name was Orvan Firenze. He carefully examined the sudden guest and realized that she looked like the emperor's children. For some reason, the stranger thought that he was looking at a girl named Rebecca. Ashtartha was surprised, and the young man continued to ask if she had really come back to mock and ridicule him. The master of the house began to approach her. He recognized the girl as his former lover. The princess was not going to find out how her mother had become this man's concubine and activated the spell to move. The man approached the girl and asked her to stop and not run away from him. He wanted to talk to her and discuss certain issues. But Ashtarth understood that this could become a death trap for her. The princess activated the spell and was transported directly to her maid. Lowena was sitting on the floor. Her strength had completely left her, and she simply could not believe that she was facing a real princess, and not a ghost or a phantom. Lowena rushed to the girl and hugged her tightly. She could not believe that her beloved mistress had finally returned to her. The girl continued to talk about all her strength that she had thrown into searching for her mistress. The princess reassured the servant and said that she would never leave her again. And there was no one to blame for this. After all, everything happened very suddenly and very quickly, and it was only Ashtartha's fault for this. The girl assured Lowena that she was the only one the princess wanted to return to, and she always wanted to be by her side in any situation, supporting and helping each other, like two kindred spirits. In the morning, the girl told how she had managed to mysteriously disappear from the lily garden. The maid found it hard to believe that the girl knew ancient languages, and that this knowledge had come to her from nowhere and had appeared so suddenly. Lowena could not believe that her mistress could know the ancient language. After all, only children of the aristocracy were taught it. The girl replied that she had managed it in a strange way, and there was no point in lying to her. But the servant began to suspect something. She remembered hearing in one of the conversations that the descendants of the Furs family had the ability to understand any of the ancient languages without the appropriate training. Such were their princes and heirs in the male line. And now, as it turned out, a princess from this glorious ancient family of rulers of a powerful state began to possess such innate abilities. Lowena addressed the girl very seriously. The servant asked that under no circumstances should the girl tell anyone else about her unusual gift. It was to become their secret. The princess realized that she, like Rin, should keep her ability to create magic a secret from outsiders. After all, it always caused trouble and problems for the sorcerer and his close people.